Um, Welcome everybody to the Fireside Chat on Pedagogy. Um, I am your host, as always, or facilitator, Justin, and today we're going to be talking about what teaching means to us, and we'll be going through some general ideas around the basically the meaning of teaching, like what's the responsibility of educators in students' lives, how much that's needed in the current times that we're living today. And if we have time, we might go into some specifics about contrasting between groups or individual um, passing on of knowledge. But we'll kind of leave that to our mentors today, who are Brandon Lee and Christina Zhou. Um, Brandon is a freelance jazz trumpeter, composer, and arranger based in New York City. He's led and recorded 3 projects under his name and 2 projects as co-leader of Uptown Jazz Tentet. Sorry,
Tentet.
I might
That's
be
good.
destroying the pronunciation.
That's
Wait,
good.
does Tentet mean 10 people?
It's just 10 people. Yeah, it's just a play on that.
Yeah, I've never seen that word before.
Yeah.
That's a large group. The member of the world famous Count Basie Orchestra. Did I pronounce that right?
That's right.
Um, and the Grammy award-winning Christian McBride Big Band. Brandon studied at the Juilliard School under the tutelage of Wynton Marsalis, Mark Gould, and Joe Wilder. He's also taught at Juilliard for 4 years, from 2009 to 2012, as well as the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, 2013 to 18, so 5 years. So Brandon has had 9 years at least of teaching, so we have a lot that we can learn from you, Brandon. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
And Christina, who we all know, founder of this wonderful group, 12Petals. She's a highly sought freelance violinist, leading educator in Singapore, currently the director and principal of Coronation Music School. Christina has performed extensively as classical chamber and orchestra violinist, as a session player for other genres, commercial projects both in the States and in Singapore. And Christina strongly believes in creating a healthier ecosystem through music and education, and she's had a lifelong mission to empower and uplift others, as we can see with this venture into 12 Petals project. So thank you, Christina, for joining us.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, guys.
So there's a lot to talk about. I think the best place I would like to start is maybe if you could start from kind of an inverted place, and Brandon, if you could talk to us a little bit about who have been the most impactful teachers in your life, and what about them stands out to you in memory.
Okay. Um. Well, I mean, so before I get to like the individual teachers, I would like to just point out that the school systems that I grew up in, particularly in Houston, that were arts magnets, were incredible. When I was younger, I believe they're still thriving pretty much the same way that they always have. And the band directors and people who led those programs at the time were also very incredible, but just those systems themselves allowed so many great musicians to sort of come out of them, and that's starting in elementary school. Like I particularly went to a school called Parker Elementary School, and then I went on to a school that was called Johnston, which changed the name, but those 2 schools before I went to the arts high school, basically arts magnets pretty much all the way till I got to Juilliard, which ended up being very similar environments like my whole life, but the benefit from that was just that, um, you know, even though a lot of those things, especially the elementary school was like after school, and maybe there was something during the day, as far as like the programs and things like that. It was just the idea that like the attention was focused on the kids like getting this art, this sort of culture, like the arts, so you can do, and even students that didn't really do music, they got a general arts education, just doing like the general music classes. But if you wanted to go deeper, you could study an instrument and things like that. So that part of it was very much, like the reason why I feel like where I am today. So moving forward, so that was elementary school, middle school. By the way, the teachers that taught there, this guy Lord Hughes and Anthony Maxey for elementary school, and then when I got to middle school, the band director was this guy named Craig Green, and they were incredible just within the system, and they were great teachers and very inspiring. I would say the first person who actually, when I got to the level, who met me at that level, and could continue to challenge me, was my high school director, whose name is Bob Morgan. We called him Doc, and he taught any jazz musician that's popular today, that's from Houston, he taught basically. Or if he didn't teach them, especially the ones that are older than me. So he is like legendary in Houston and that kind of thing. But he challenged us all the time, and so I would say that his method of teaching was basically that we're playing a music that's known to people to be loose and to be improvisatory. And a lot of people still don't really understand everything about jazz, as far as just like the structure and the discipline and all that kind of stuff. And I would say that having the education from Doc Morgan at an early age helped me to understand that it takes a lot of focus, it takes a lot of discipline, it takes a lot of structure, it takes a lot of practice. Like there's no, any of the stereotypes about it didn't exist to him. Like, and that's kind of what he wanted us to understand. It's just like people were like, oh yeah, well, close enough for jazz, that kind of stuff. And it's like he did not really do that. He didn't care for that stereotype thing, and he really just kind of made us understand that, like, if you really want to play this music, you have to go out, you have to do all these things way more than most people have to do. Like to just prove yourself to the music world or to the system or whatever it is. And so I got that message from him. So that was he was definitely one of my more influential. And then as I left and went to Juilliard, like Wynton Marsalis being one of my just personal heroes growing up. When I got a chance to be there and study with him, that became like the new level of, of like, okay, yeah, now it's like really on some other stuff as far as like excellence and like what you have to do to get to where you want to be. So.
Okay, so there's a lot here. I'm curious about, let's go back to Bob Morgan. Bob Morgan.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So you said there's a stereotype around the type of music you guys are doing of it being loose.
Mm-hmm.
And by loose, did you mean it's just like kind of well, I guess I'll contrast it. It sounds like Bob Morgan upheld a certain type of standard.
Mm-hmm. He definitely did. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, what are some examples of things that?
Yeah. So basically, the term loose is. Obviously, you can sort of put that in a lot of. It's a loaded term, but basically, just meaning, jazz has always been in comparison to classical music, you know, because I mean, especially once the jazz world decided that they wanted to make their music more focused on like the serious part of it, like they wanted it to be in concert halls as opposed to just only jazz clubs and dance halls and things like that. So so and that, you know, so that's from early on, you know, in the 40s, bebop musicians wanting the music to be taken a little bit more seriously. And so I think ever since then, you know, there's been this sort of thing. It's just like it's a thing where you're trying to convince, you know, the other like legit music that like the music that we play also is legit. Like it's a thing that we spend hours and hours practicing, listening, doing, you know, the techniques and the ways that we play the music are not exactly the same at a certain point. So it does kind of go off, but he kind of he understood that there was this thing that was happening, you know, within the world. And when I got to Juilliard, and I'll get back to Bob in a second, but when I got to Juilliard, Wynton was obviously very aware of that because he was a musician that did both. And his message was always saying, he always said, I just want us to be able to say we're musicians, and like we don't have to say that we're like jazz or classical. And like, you know, and really to the most basic point, even 2001 when I first got to Juilliard, classical, you know, young classical musicians, maybe they knew more than the teachers did, but the stereotypes were still really high then. It's like, do you guys read music? You know, these are the questions that we're getting, like, as I'm walking down the halls, you know what I mean? And it's like really weird things that I just don't think should have existed, you know, that long after jazz had been created, first of all. You know, just the idea that like everybody who plays it like is just only doing things by ear and only doing these types of things. So to get back to my teacher in high school, he really kind of prepared all of us to understand that, for one, that thing was out there, and also to learn how to sort of rise above it, and to already be in a place where you're ahead of those stereotypes. And so we would have rehearsals, and there's a whole bunch of things, but like, you know, I'll just give like an example of something. So we'll be in rehearsal, and like there'll be 4 trumpets up on the stage, and, you know, up playing the music, you know, and, you know, I would be one of them at a certain point, and there would maybe be 3 other trumpet players like sitting behind him that are not playing on that song, or maybe even the entire concert sometimes. And so he would trade people in and out, but like the way that he would do it, it was always like this very tense environment. Like he's just like, you go home, you practice the music. Like you don't practice the music when you get to rehearsal. Like the rehearsal is about other things. Like we have to get ensemble stuff together. So if people are messing up parts over and over, you know, of course he stops the band, he hears it, he's just like, can I hear trumpet too? You know, trumpet, and it's not like, can I hear the trumpet section? He's like, you play your part alone. And it's like, if it's not perfect, if it's not like if it's not what he wants to hear, he's just like, okay, I'm gonna excuse you off of this part. Can you go? Yeah, you're gonna play this part now. And like, it was like that intense all the time. So like he basically brought like this intensity to the jazz sort of thing that made us feel like we needed to have like higher expectations for what we did at a very early age. So
Just the respect for people and the music, right?
yeah, respect for the people who for the music before, and also just in at the time, just respect for what we're doing. Like, you know, we're presenting a concert in a few weeks, and like, you know, family, parents, you know, people are coming out. Like, even though it's a high school band, it's like, you know, we're playing this music, you know, of whoever, Duke Ellington or whoever. It's like, it's, for him, it was like, it needs to be perfect. Like, it needs to be, he always said it has to be 100%, 110% in rehearsal, because at the performance, it's always going to be a little bit less. And so he was like, if it's 110 here, I can settle for like 100%, or
Mhm.
95% at the concert. That's kind of what he did all the time. So.
Okay. Okay. I wanna hold on. Like I wanna kind of stay in this area for a bit. So
Mhm.
because this is something that reminds me of something I was talking to Christina about, which was one thing that teachers seem to have a strong responsibility for is to demonstrate to what degree of nuance you can care about your work, and what kind of questions you should be asking, and what kind of things you should be paying attention to. So, for example, for Bob Morgan to call out a specific trumpet player for a specific passage, um, that there's so much that there's so much information that gets passed on in that moment, right? Because
Mhm.
it brings the students to the level of awareness of, oh, like that, even that level of detail matters. Um,
Right.
and there's that level of detail, that there's the seriousness of it, and that if you can't do it, then then you're out. It
Yeah.
also can, and linked to that is the seriousness of how much you need to practice outside of rehearsal. There's like so much information. Christina, you were talking about, if I can go back to my notes there, because you have younger students who are just starting to learn how to play the violin, and I was wondering if anything came up for you while listening to that, around the the awareness training, like what I guess I guess well, I guess the question is like, how much have you thought about that? Like, do
Mhm.
you have, when you're teaching your students, do you specifically have your attention on the places where they're not focusing and fill that in, or like what's your general method around addressing that, and bringing their
Yeah,
awareness up to a higher
I I think for me the most important part is knowing that we play music, we perform, uh, and with regards to teaching, music is just an expression and a way, a tool, or a channel for us to address the real, like, uh, physiological issues of any student.
Mhm.
So because, like we talked about, I always go back to uh, music doesn't lie. So if you have insecurities, no matter what age you have, what age you're at, whether you're 4 years old, or 14, 24, right?
Mhm.
Um, at 4 years old, what happens is, they're not aware of their concentration. They're like skipping around. So when they do that, it comes through in the music, right? They play halfway, like one bar, and then their mind just slips off, So it's sort of like, hey, can you hear your music just stopped? You didn't play the whole phrase,
Mhm.
So could you hear that? I saw, I can hear your brain going into another space. Could you catch that? So it's just bringing that kind of
Mhm.
awareness to the little ones so that they start to realize, and then I think the approach has always been, what can I do so that, you know, you can give them tools for them to uh, use it in other aspects of their life. So if it means having a better concentration, we work on that. How can music, uh, or if they have insecurities about their own playing, it comes through in the playing, right? Because there's no confidence, there's no, they don't
Right.
believe in what they do. So we got to go from that standpoint, and the music doesn't lie. Once you address those like internal issues, the music just flows, and technically it gets better. So my own mentor from Eastman, he's passed on already, but he, from the first year, he always tells me, technique is conception. And I never understood that at that age, you know, but this is something that is just like resounding and have deeper meaning as I get older and as I play, because everything boils down to how you think, right? So technique, you know, the physical, you know, of getting your chops to a higher level, that you put in time, you put in, you know, uh, you have the vibes for it, you can get it up there. But then if you don't have the conception of what you want, technique is not there, right? Yeah, and then he, after a while, he also say like conception is technique, so it's something that you have to train your mind for. So that's, I think, one of the pretty crucial uh, core motivation for how I approach any age in my teaching. Yeah.
Technique is conception. So that's a lot to do with intention. Like, yeah, and I think going back to what this entire thing about awareness training, it's like I feel like it takes a while for a person to develop what it even means to have an intention and what it is that they're trying to even serve. Like with your younger students, it sounds like it's more about helping them become a self-sustaining musician, and it's more about themselves and learning how to express and learning how to kind of internalize at an individual level. And then Brandon, with your experience in high school, it sounds like it became a bigger / more specific thing. Like it's almost like if Christina's students are like stem cells, and then in high school you're starting to go into like kind of, okay, well these are liver cells now, and we kind of know how to be a cell, and we gotta specialize, and we have like a bigger goal. And it sounds like with Bob Morgan, he was starting to bring into awareness this like larger thing that you're in service to, where it's assumed that you know how to express yourself, it's assumed that you know how to play your instrument, but now like, how do you bring that skill into the service of like this larger organism that needs all its parts to be at a certain degree of quality?
I think, like just now when you mentioned to teach students to become more self-sustaining, not I don't even think it's becoming self-sustaining musicians, but human first, because we're all humans first. So because a lot of majority of my students, they might not go into the music industry, right? And but if you're able to retain that love and that spark, and they start to own that, then it will carry them through in life. Yeah. So just wanted to.
And I'm curious, Brandon, we've kind of just done like this two-step evolution of like, okay, well, like children playing their violins, and then you playing trumpet for a big band. What was it like going from high school to Juilliard with Wynton Marsalis, and you said there was like a new level of, um, of I guess the quality of the teaching, or the quality. If we stay on this discussion about what a level of nuance of awareness is being developed by your teaching? Like, what can you articulate some of how the level change
Yeah.
felt?
Yeah. So like one of my yeah, I definitely remember very vividly. One of my first lessons with Wynton, he asked me to. Well, he asked me to do a lot of stuff actually. So because he knew he was going away for a little bit on tour, and so he sort of piled on a lot of things. But one of the assignments that he gave me was to transcribe 5 different trumpet players, and each one had to be in a different um, era of the jazz. Like a different jazz sort of style or different jazz era. So I did Louis Armstrong, Roy Eldridge. I think I did a Dizzy Gillespie maybe at the time, and swing trumpet player probably Harry. Well, I think Roy Eldridge might have been the swing trumpet player. So that meant that so that meant that Dizzy Gillespie was the bebop trumpet player, and then I moved on to, I think I did a Miles Davis solo, and then I did a Freddie Hubbard, and then the last one I did was one of him. Of course, he didn't want to hear his own solo. So, but actually, when I got to the lesson, he, I had prepared these solos, because actually my history teacher at the time was sort of giving us another lesson on the way, another sort of way to think about playing solo. So this was also kind of like a level up on the way that I thought about transcribing. And his thing was saying, like the way that he thought about it. This is his name is Lawrence Schoenberg. He's a jazz historian, and he basically had the concept of learn everything exactly how the recording goes. And for jazz musicians, always thinking about like how their sound is and like, their concept, like it when they transcribe, a lot of times they're really only thinking about the notes and maybe, just like kind of getting some ideas from another person and moving on. And so Lawrence Schoenberg was basically saying, he brought in solos to the jazz history class and made us learn them and play them in jazz history, which is crazy because it's not supposed to be a performing class. But so he would bring in a Louis Armstrong, and so basically, long story short, by the time Wynton asked me to do this for him, I had already been doing like these things where I was like learning verbatim, like literally, like articulations, vibrato, like, and like literally you're just like mimicking as much as possible the person that you're transcribing, as opposed to trying to do it your own way. So I get into the lesson and I had all this prepared, all the way up to his solo, the 5 trumpet players or something like that, 5 or 6. And he sat me down. He was just like, okay, let me see Louis Armstrong solo. And so I pulled it out and I got my horn ready. And he's like, okay, now tell me about this, like talk to me about this solo. And I'm like, talk to you? Like, wait, what do you mean? It's like, it's a Louis Armstrong solo. He's like, no, it's like, if you're just like, hanging out with some cats, your friends, you're just sitting on, like, at the time he was like, if you're just sitting on the stoop, with your friends. I'm like, I don't have many stoops that I sit on, but yeah, it's just sitting on the stoop with your friends, like, what are you gonna say about Louis Armstrong, like this solo? And so he started giving like some examples about like, just like, yeah, at this time such and such does this, and then like it does this high thing, and then blah blah. Like basically he like narrates half of the solo that I transcribed. And his thing for me, and the thing that I got from those lessons early on, was that it's one thing to be able to play, and there's another thing to be able to articulate what you're playing. And this is like, and my dad is on right now, and he used to always say this when we watched different documentaries and things like that back in the day. And Wynton was always very highly, like, just Like he was always the person that people wanted to be on these like jazz documentaries and things like that because of his way of being able to present music and like to talk about it and to really break it down and to, you know, not saying that there weren't several other people that could do this, but that was one of the things that he learned early on, and that was one of the things that he imparted to me. Now, I was at that time at 18, I was not really that great at like wanting to speak in front of people or speak, you know, a lot in general, unless it was just like close friends or, you know, just very insular, um, that kind of thing. As far, and so he just kind of got it out of me. It's just like you got to be able to articulate like what did he do here, like, you know, how did this make, you know, what phrases did he play that was the same as here? And he literally made me go through each transcription and talk through the transcription, like talk about it. And that those were the moments that really helped me to be able to do the things that I've been doing as far as like teaching, mentoring, like to really dive into detail about the music that I play, as opposed to just like picking up the horn, because I can also pick up my horn and also do it, but you know, it was like more of a challenge for me to be able to articulate it. And so at that point it was just like, you know, anytime I'm leading a big band or whoever, like, you know, all 5 years that I was in North Carolina, I never brought my instrument down to the rehearsal room. Like I was just like, if there's something I want them to do, like I know I can get to it really fast on my horn, but like if there's something I want them to do, I need to be able to just find a way to articulate it to them, you know, so they get it. And so so that's part of what I meant about like the level sort of rising. It kind of just went to a different level of like, you know, that kind of thing. It's just like, oh, okay. It's not just about understanding how to play it. It's also understanding how to get it out there and, you know, to share it with people.
That's really cool because it kind of goes full circle back to the individual. Like it's, you know, Christina's students start learning how to even play their instrument, and then you kind of learn how to put it together in high school, and then you go to Juilliard, and it's like, well, now like what do you care about?
Right.
It's like what stands out to you? Like how does this music feel to you? And to ask you that question, it really like integrates it into yourself. And
that's exactly right. Yeah.
That's really cool. Right. That's such a simple exercise too.
Yeah.
Just talking,
right.
talking.
Right. Yeah. Simple on its surface. Yeah. Exactly.
Simple to execute, but yeah, so much value.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Christina, you had a very profoundly impactful mentor at Eastman. Can you talk to us a little bit about him again? You mentioned him earlier, right? He's the one who.
Yeah. So Mr. Steve Zeitlin, he passed on in 2012. So when going into Eastman, I was completely, I guess, ignorant into what I was getting. I didn't know who he was, you know, or like just sort of. Eastman was like a sponge for me to learn everything, because prior to that, I only had just one-to-one private lessons. And I think my first teacher was also very influential in the sense that he taught me um, kindness and just have fun with playing different pieces, because I was a very lazy kid, you know. So even when I didn't practice, he would find different ways during the lesson to, you know, just get me to play and enjoy the music. So I think that's super crucial for how I approach all my students now too. So like what Brendan mentioned, you know, when he went to Juilliard, it's a different level. So at Eastman, that's when I got completely deconstructed by my mentor,
Right.
because it's like I don't know anything. I
Yeah.
really don't know. And then it's like deconstruction and reconstruction. So he because he cared so much about us, like every student, and he cared so much about music. It's not about politics, not about nothing like that. Just pure dedication.
Hmm.
So an example would even be like, you know, we have like all those spring breaks, winter break. Winter break is 1 month or something.
A
Yeah,
lot of times for colleges, yeah.
yeah. So I was from Singapore, so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I don't get to go home, right? So he would just call me up and be like, "What are you doing tomorrow?" I was like, "Oh, it's the winter break." Then he would just he's known to be really, 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 really terrifying, like fierce. He would be screaming at the top of his lungs. That kind of old
Mm-hmm.
school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but he's basically like an old grandpa for me,
Yeah.
you know. Because when I studied with him, he's already 82.
Uh,
Yeah. So my first teacher too was an older like grandpa figure, you know.
mm-hmm.
So so but he just cares, you know. I think that's the biggest thing. Um, when someone truly cares about your well-being, there's no way that you're not going to change. There's no way that you're not going to absorb,
Hmm.
because you know he always tells me also like, you're not curious enough. And I would talk back to him, you know. I'll be like, what do you mean? I'm learning this. I come for lesson like 3 times a week. You call me back 3 times a week, you know, and we would just have like this huge argument. You know. Yeah. And yeah, so the winter break thing here is like, what is a break? There's no break in my life. Come back for lesson. I'm like, oh. Then I'll be telling my friends like, oh my god, I can't hang out, I have to practice, you know. I'm like, why? So at those moments I don't understand it, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I thought, but you know, at the back of my mind, I'm like, also, if he doesn't care, why would he do this?
Yeah, he would never do that.
So
Yeah.
I just need to trust him, you know, and trust that I'm getting ripped apart every single time for 4 years of my life. Every single lesson, because people would hear him screaming down the hallway. Every time they come out of the elevator, he'd be like, what are you doing? That's not how you play, you know. But I didn't pass on that kind of, you
That
know.
same way of teaching. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's the same fire, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like caring, like really concerned about
Mm-hmm.
the well-being. Yeah, like one time, you know, he I think it was my third year or fourth year. Um, he just came walking into the practice room to look for me, to like wanted to tell me something about you know, something we worked on the lesson or something. I was like, and everyone was like, oh, Mr. Zylin's here. Like, what is she doing? What is she doing? You know, that there was fear, but then, you know, it's all good. It's,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've known any other person with that type of like fire
Mm-hmm.
and dedication to music, to life, and to people. Yeah, yeah. Now I'm talking about it. And
Yeah.
yeah, I miss him so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a big one. The word care, like, because you know, we've been talking about this for about 40 minutes now, and I'm thinking like, at the end, is maybe that is what it just kind of comes down to, is like, what what deserves to be cared about.
Hmm.
And it seems like that's kind of the big role of teachers, um, is what deserves to be cared about, what deserves to be fought for, what deserves to maybe even sometimes be rude to get the message across. Like how much does something matter, or
Mm-hmm.
basically like what matters
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
needs to be the core mission of a teacher.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, and when I think about it from that context, it makes me curious, Brandon, about or it makes me imagine maybe some of the core intention of why you might be taking a break from teaching. Because I imagine if you do it for 9 years, then then you've passed on your messages and your experience for a long time. But now it's kind of like you're kind of coming back to yourself, um, to to go back to how you feel, how what you feel like matters.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I kind of want to go off track a little bit, um, just to talk a little bit about what your experience has been like coming out of teaching
Mm-hmm.
and going a lot more full force into performance, and and whether or not while you're doing that, has there been some awareness about what it's going to be like or how teaching is going to be different for you after this?
Mm-hmm.
Um, have you been spending any attention there, like, oh, like while you're performing, or
Right.
in the midst of your performing lifestyle, it's like, oh, I can see how there's new stuff that I would like to bring back.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, I left. I did feel like I needed to get like a little bit of uh a little bit of a breath, sort of like to catch my breath a little bit. Because again, well, I'm not sure if I set this in here, but I think you introduced it. Just basically, like I went and I was at Juilliard, but I started teaching there. But it was literally immediately after I graduated. Um,
Right.
so my teaching started at a very early age, um, 24, 25 maybe, and it went until I was pretty much 35. I had like a year in between before I moved to North Carolina, um, but which is why it ended up being just 9 years. But as far as like the span of that sort of period was like a decade. But it was also just immediately after leaving school, so I really did feel like I didn't have a lot of time to think on some of the things, or to even have a lot of experience performing as much as I wanted to. Um, and so to your question about when I'm performing now, um, you know, these experiences, like every new experience I have, really does give me like another way of thinking about presenting, what, sharing things to students, like, or potential students, or just someone who wants to have like a hour lesson, or just someone talking to me in the back of a club after a gig or something like that. Like I'll always feel like when I'm in those moments and I'm able to experience new things and sort of add that to my to what I do, um, it it has to for me. I feel like it has helped for me to clarify like my purpose and like the things that I want to do, because I don't think like I was saying before the Zoom, before all of this started with you two, Justin, and Christina, like I really don't think that I have lost like my initial passion for teaching. Very quickly, for everyone who's on, I was sharing just like growing up in a family where it was musical, but it was also educational. My parents were both uh, uh, musically influenced. My dad is a piano player. He was a band director, and still plays today. My mom was a singer. She unfortunately she passed away a couple of years ago. due to cancer. But she was an incredible singer. But she was primarily an educator, like as far as just like a grade school educator, and so we grew up around that. We grew up around the mentality of teaching and sharing and sort of like the idea of, or at least what I got out of it was like never ending sort of just a life of learning type of thing. Um, but the thing that I also got from my parents directly was like the thing that you were saying before about um, Christina, about just like just like the caring part, and how far that really, how important that really is. Um, and there's been a lot of discussions about those things, just in, the last maybe 15 to 20 years, just about the dedication that certain people have to that profession, and because it doesn't pay that much, people are just in and out, and all of these kind of things. But when my parents were teaching, and their teachers that they had, and even when we were in school in the 90s and you know uh, late 80s and 90s, like the teachers that were teaching, like everyone, it just seemed like everyone cared. I mean, if they didn't care, they were like the oddball out, and you like picked them out right away. It's just like, okay, that's like a bad teacher, and try to, or whatever, like that's not going to be the teacher for you. And so they would try to switch us around to somebody else. But like it didn't happen that much back when I was growing up, and 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 I just knew that wasn't the way that my parents approached teaching, especially being able to see my mom in action a lot of times teaching. So anyway, so basically, like I just feel like I haven't really, that is something that I am still trying to re-energize in myself. Like, when is going to be the next time that I'm going to be like, I want to be back on a campus, or I want to be in front of students all the time, just kind of dealing with whatever the new sort of way that everything is happening, uh, you know, which it's just what it is. But it's more about, you know, when I feel like I'm energized within myself to be able to do it, is when I'm gonna go for it, and so yeah. So anyway, I'm not sure if all of that connected, but basically just, it's
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that it, nobody likes a teacher who clearly doesn't want to be a teacher.
mm-hmm,
Like, like it's really, I feel like there's a lot of integrity in what you're talking about, which is like, if you do go back, it's you want to feel excited or called to it.
mm-hmm,
And I think the fact that you stepped out of it, um, I think the fact that you've stepped out of it because you don't, uh, presumably you don't feel that, and presumably
mm-hmm.
because you want to do something else. I feel like there's a lot of integrity in that. It's probably helpful for, as just like as a story of how to conduct oneself as a musician or professional.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure anybody who comes in connection with you or meets you will learn just from that, not necessarily through direct teaching, but through,
Right, right.
through
And I strongly believe, whether you're like teaching and performing or doing one
Mm-hmm.
only, that there's no true segregation
Right,
from that. Because when you perform, I'm very sure there's so what is teaching? Teaching is also learning, right?
right.
So whoever's on the receiving end, you're always learning
Yeah.
from watching a performance.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, my mentor, he lived until he was 90, and he was performing up till
Wow.
2 months before he passed on. Like
Yeah.
his final recital, and just that's like
Wow. Yeah.
true dedication to the art, to
Yeah.
the world, to himself, and to the students.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was in Singapore already when he passed, but I heard like when um before he like officially retired, which was just like 2 months before he passed on. He said like, I'm never gonna stop, at 90.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think like, Brendan, what you're doing is still incredible. You're more headspace for the performance, but it's actually all gearing up for
Right.
great stuff,
Mm-hmm.
for whoever's gonna be watching you
Yeah.
perform.
Yeah.
You know, that's something in the contextual, like, knowledge based teaching, it's different.
Right. Right.
And the caring part, it has to go both ways too,
Right.
right? There are students who completely don't care, and no matter how much
Yeah.
you care,
Yeah.
they don't care, right? So
Yeah.
I think our job is just to do our best to show them that we care. Maybe
Yeah. Exactly.
10 years down the road they'll be like, oh, I did have a teacher that really cared.
Yeah.
I
Exactly.
just didn't see it, and that's fine.
Right.
That's fine. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I experienced a lot, and that's, I mean, even on my end, like you said, both ways. It's like we were talking earlier. It's like there's a lot of things that I got from teachers that I had no idea that they were saying that until I got to a certain place in my own life and experience. It's just like, oh, that's what they were saying, and so sometimes it can come across as like not caring, but sometimes it could just be just like it's just not for them at that moment. Like they're just not ready for it. So and those are the things, like when I was saying before, like I teaching, even though it feels like it's older, like I was older, but like going to North Carolina at 30 and getting that opportunity to really get into like the actual teaching at a university, like I was getting hit over the head, like just for myself, as far as just like, I was just in my own head about like, am I reaching them? Is is it like all these things you're saying, like, and then eventually it started to get to this point. It's just like, well, if I start letting off of myself as far as the caring part, because I grew up with knowing that my parents in their profession cared deeply about what they did, like, then like how much am I going to matter? Like if I start letting that go and I'm just here for the paycheck, then like I just feel like I'm not going to be, in a good place, so. And so that's what I meant a little bit about just like re-energizing and just sort of taking a break and like, kind of getting more together for myself so I can understand what those things were that broke down, and like so that I can sort of better be able to do it when I get back, to it, so, but thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right, as far as that whole thing. So.
We have about 5 minutes left. I think it would be nice to end on this care thing. Like I'm curious about, based on y'all's experience, what is it that you've been taught is worth caring about, and that you're grateful for learning that it's worth caring about. So, running off, like one example, a kickoff example is with Brandon, with the the question of like, talk to me about this phrase, like that. I can see how that can open up somebody's world into, oh, like this is worth thinking about, like being able to talk about my thoughts around a phrasing or a specific passage of performance, being able to communicate it well, being able to know how to articulate the feelings that I have around this. Using that as an example, I'm curious to hear from you guys some of the stuff that you've learned to care about, or learned that you care about, thanks to a good teacher.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll just briefly just say, I mean, one of the things that one of the things I do really agree with Christina about is just like the well-being of the students and like just the overall that overall thing, but also like just sort of getting a little bit deeper. I mean, just sort of going more specific to jazz. Um, the students in that sort of that are in this sort of jazz world, especially at a very early age. And this is basically for any art, but when you're out there and you're sort of making up music, kind of improvising, over forms, things like that, at a very early age, it really does open up to a lot of yourself, kind of like what Christina was saying also earlier, just about like you find out like the music doesn't lie. You find out I can like pinpoint the personality of a person like within like a few bars of them playing like improvising over a tune, and like it's one so one of the things that I really do value, like I really do care about is really developing helping the students to develop themselves, and that's something that I got from just sort of kind of like I guess you could say kind of just like a general sort of the all of the teachers I had, just like in the way that they sort of taught, like I got this message, a general message about just like, you are your product, you like who you become is what you're gonna sort of produce, so that's something that I really do care about in individual lessons is connecting with the student and making sure that like they're okay, and like just being able to open up to them about things that are not, and for them to be able to open up as whatever's the you know open up enough, a teacher student relationship, but like enough to just be able to feel like they can like you know develop and just understand themselves a little bit more. So if they're going through the same sort of problems that everybody, or things that everybody goes through, 18, and like got a girlfriend or boyfriend, and like you're doing things and it doesn't go right, so they come to a they come to a lesson and they're just like slumped down, and it's just like you don't have to disclose everything, but like, how are you feeling? Like, let's
Yeah.
talk about it. Like, what's going on? Like I really do feel like the power of those one on ones, especially when like for the young adults, like in college, are like very important. Like just being able to, for them to be able to have someone to talk to, and I mean it's not a therapy session, but it's just like, and that in turn helps them as artists. It helps the music.
Mm.
um and so that's something that I really do feel very strongly about when it comes to like the caring part. It's just it's and that's what I got from my teachers. That's what I got from Mark Gould. Like it wasn't always just like trumpet on my face. It was like him trying to figure out how I'm feeling, like being at Juilliard. It's like, yeah, it's like the first few years of the jazz program. Like, what's going on? Like, how are you dealing? How is it happening? How's it working out for you? And sometimes I would go in there and I would have some, little tears, like, but those are like the places, like you feel, after a while, you feel comfortable just being vulnerable around people like that, and so I always wanted to create that environment for my students as well. So.
I think for me, two things stand out the most, and it's uplifting the sense of self-worth, and also ownership of, because you know in this society, like everyone grows up being compared
Hmm.
to something else. How do we actually get our own voice and be comfortable with ourselves from a young age? So, and if you really care about that, and then the student, and relate it in a way to them that they can understand in their language, uh, then that really goes a long way. So I think I have two examples that I can think of. This young little girl who very strong-headed, very smart, very but always throwing tantrums, right? And there's one time where she just didn't want to play because she was angry that why did she have to learn two instruments when her brother, is not learning any instrument, or, just, and she'll be like, he's only 1 year old younger than me. Like, everything she says is valid, like her pain. I could feel her pain. Then basically I just told her, like, I just took some pencils, I said, okay, this is what's happening. You have two pencils now. If you learn this pencil is yours forever. Like, basically, like an analogy.
Like you
You
own it,
keep
yeah.
this. No one can take it from you. I said, do you want, okay, if you want to compare with your brother, he has nothing now, right? And do you want me to take that away from you? It's your choice. So it's both ways, And suddenly something clicked in her mind, and she was like, oh. And then when she calmed her mind down, the music was so much better, So it's not the technical part. Because sometimes, when they throw tantrums, we're like, come on, like, just get to the, just get. And that
Right.
happens when we start to care about ourselves, as teachers. We're like, you're wasting my time. You're wasting, instead of like
Yeah.
understanding where they're coming from.
Right.
And then there's one adult student who I'm not teaching her anymore, but for the past 4 years, she wrote a letter to me, and then she just mentioned, like, never in my life has a teacher ever asked me how I was feeling that week or cared about me, So she was like, thank you for that, And I think sometimes when students, they remind us why we're doing all this.
Right.
It just takes just
Yeah.
one sentence, because you know that they care,
Right.
that you care,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's enough energy and, like, mana for a lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Ironically, we go into a fireside chat about the pedagogy of music, and it seems like the moral of the story is don't forget to ask how you're doing.
yeah.
Yeah. How are you feeling?
Truly, like, truly
Yeah.
asking it, and not just
Mm-hmm.
how are you
Not just a
again?
part of the. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, we have something in the chat. Oh. So yeah, Justin, do you just wanna
Yeah,
narrate
attending,
that? Yeah.
and it struck me that the mentors Brandon and Christina shared about people who really left a mark have a kind of idealism to educate others, to love the art and propagate it.
Awesome.
And in this teaching, they pass on this idealism. Then it is up to us what this meant to us and what we take on it as. Yeah,
Awesome. Thank you for that.
yeah, I think, yeah, really, learning what matters is not a task to be underestimated. I think it's a lifelong thing, and I think you guys as teachers are contributing to the nuanceification of that, and also the constant reminding. I think reminders are important as well, not just specifying, but also just like reminding. And I think it shows in both of y'all's practice of asking how your students are, to remind people that that's something that is worth caring about. And that's been a big takeaway for me.
Awesome.
And
Awesome.
Well, thank you guys.
Well, thank
Yeah. Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Justin, and everyone
you.
on the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Tenny, thank you, Herman, thank you, Zevi, thank you, Lydia, for your last closing thoughts, and yeah, we'll see you guys again soon.
Yeah. See you guys. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good
Appreciate
night,
it.
Brendan.
Thank you. You
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Take care.
Bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye.